and support student entrepreneurs across the entire state of Maryland.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Stephanie. And Henry, you got something for us?
Yes. Thanks for having me. I'm not that technologically savvy. I've got the messy background and can't find the buttons, but I'm Henry Mortimer. I'm the director of the Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation, CEI, at the University of Baltimore. We've been in operation supporting student and alumni ventures since 2006, and until very recently, we had a presence on campus. We've switched everything over at the moment, as I think everybody can attest to, working online and trying to stay alone together with our budding entrepreneurs. We have our primary focus is working with our fellows, our entrepreneurship fellows, and I think one or two have joined us today. So that's great to have some support from the students as well. We have 2 pitch competitions, one at the end of each semester. Our spring competition is called Rise to the Challenge. We give away about $25,000 or more in prize money. It was actually originally scheduled for next week, but because of everything that's been going on, we pushed it back to early June. We'll have a date to announce shortly, but we're moving forward with that. And we do weekly how-to workshops offering information about not only just how to run an enterprise, but networking and fundamental skills that anyone can use once they get out into the business community. And we have a very robust mentorship program, which is I guess chimes well with our discussion today. We utilize the volunteer efforts of our alumni as well as members of the business community. And really what I look at the center, the role we play is to serve as applied learning. So whatever the students are getting in class, they can come to me and meet with somebody to discuss projects. If they have questions about a business, we can connect them. And we have relationships with the SBA, with SCORE. We have a SCORE office in our center. And we work pretty closely with just about all the other groups. David's group, we work with, we're trying to get our Radcliffe fellows together with MICA this spring for the first time, I would think. And unfortunately, we had to postpone that as well. So yeah, we're here serving as the front door of entrepreneurship in Baltimore City, as we like to say.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Henry. Yeah, thank you. And last but certainly not least, Lindsay.
Hi there. Yeah, happy to join today. And so I'm from the University System of Maryland, and if in case anyone isn't sure what that is, it's the backbone that connects the 12 public higher education institutions in the state of Maryland. And so David from Towson and Henry from UBalt are in our group and our system, and our role in the Office of Economic Development is to bring these universities together, not only with each other, but also with external groups. Entrepreneurship looks different across all 12 universities, and our office has only existed for about 4 years at the system level to bring it all together. And the combination of being kind of new and this wide range of diversity of what's going on is still really exciting to wrap our arms around. To give you an idea, a lot of it is entrepreneurship for student benefit, developing talent. Some of it's technology commercialization, so pushing out the research that we've done into impact. Some of it is more of an economic development play, talking jobs, incubators, stuff like that. Again, the scale is, some of the early numbers that we're pulling together is more than 100 companies each year, either spinning out of, or like I like to say, is spinning into our universities. So a lot of people hear about university technology spin outs, they're coming out, launching into the world. In Maryland, we support probably just about as many companies that haven't had anything to do with us before this as we have our own companies. So these are maybe in industries where we can be powerful partners. We have research parks and incubators. So it's really fun. One of the things that we've done, my last, I guess, intro here is at our office level, which again has only been around for about 4 years, we also have an investment fund where we are making investments in companies, not only spinning out of, but again, spinning into. So companies joining incubators like David's incubator are eligible for this fund, which is the Momentum Fund. So that's, I'll wrap it up there. I should also mention I'm on the board of Innovate with Stephanie, but I am so new to that don't ask me any questions. Ask them all to Stephanie.
All right. Well, that makes it pretty easy here to do this. And Chris, thank you very much for posting that prompt in chat. I forgot to mention it. If you have a question for all or any of our panelists, feel free to please put that in the chat box, and we'll be sure to hit that a little bit later in our panel discussion. Henry, I want to start it with you first. You know, you had mentioned, you know, kind of being that front door, that entryway from the city of Baltimore into entrepreneurship. How really has your role changed since we're all in a remote working environment now?
How has my role as the director, or how has the center's role changed?
Both.
Both. Yeah. Well, my role as the director, it's interesting. One of the side effects, I guess, or maybe benefits really, of having to be in this situation is, surprisingly, I find I have more contact with the students on a regular basis. Not that they didn't come by and see the center on, you know, when we were back under normal circumstances, but they are looking for this close contact more frequently. So I'm texting with students, which I've never really done before, and answering questions, doing Zoom calls once a week. So that's been a nice change that I've noticed. I obviously miss being on campus, being face to face. So that's been a little bit hard to adjust to. But you know, one of the things that I think makes makes university entrepreneurship programs so unique and so valuable is right now. You know, I'm working with students, and the students at the University of Baltimore are somewhat different than, you know, at a traditional four-year college. Most of them have come back. They're in the workforce and have gone back to college. And so they are working, whether full-time or part-time, managing families, and you know, doing lots of things, as well as launching a business or a side hustle. And one of the things I've seen is that innovative spirit doesn't go away. It actually ramps up at moments like this unexpectedly. I don't know what I was expecting, I guess, but it's been really amazing to see several students who are finalists in this pitch competition that I mentioned are, in addition to doing everything I just talked about, they're working on making masks through the Makers Mask movement. I took so you asked how's the center changed. I took our 3D printer from the center and delivered it to one of the students, as well as an additional printer that we had on campus. And those two who are finalists in our program are also making component parts for N95 masks and the like, as well as several other students, including yet another finalist, who are sewing masks for, you know, non-essential workers. So they didn't stop. They got busier, or allowed themselves to stay busy, and using their skills developed that are supporting the businesses that they're working on. So you know, like I said, I've been impressed.
Yeah. And Stephanie, I know that, you know, MICA is a huge maker community as well, and you mentioned even the connection with OpenWorks. How exactly have you seen MICA's entrepreneurs in the maker kind of community kind of step up during this time?
So much has shifted for our students alumni as makers. So similar to what Henry was mentioning, we have a number of alumni who are either making PPE, or they're sewing masks for their family and friends and their community members to keep one another safe. We've had to shift all of our programming and events to virtual formats, including our accelerator, which is extremely difficult because a lot of the value inherently lies in the community being able to come together and learn from one another, to network with one another. And so how do you replicate the same value in a virtual way has been really difficult. And then also just challenging all of us to be a little bit more empathetic as well. As difficult as this situation might be for us as adults, it is 10 times more difficult for our students who have never lived through something like this before, who have so much that's being uprooted and changed in their lives in terms of their academics, their professional work, their personal lives. You know, all of that has been uprooted in a very, very short amount of time. And so just, you know, it challenges me as somebody who's working in this field and working so directly with these students to really meet them where they are, and to be a little bit more empathetic and understanding of the situations that they might be going through.
That's great. Yeah. David or Lindsay, do you have anything you wanted to mention here?
So I'll just say, obviously, we tend to work more with existing businesses and a bit less with the student side of it. But as I mentioned, a lot of our companies are in the education space. And so as we all know, whether it's post-secondary or K-12, this move to online learning has been a big challenge for everybody in that environment. And I think what's been particularly interesting for us, and if you check out our Medium post, you can find out about this, but the number of our education-related companies that have gone out there and are going the extra mile for those educators and students. And so whether it's providing their application at no cost or low cost, and just working kind of flat out to try and get that online education so that the students can be successful. And so that's been, to me, the really interesting part of it. It's so sad that so many businesses are being negatively impacted by all of this. And I guess we're fortunate that quite a number of our education-related companies have actually had the other problem that they're really trying to now scale up. And a lot of our companies, the number of users that they've had, much like Zoom, the expansion of that's been, a lot of our member companies are just working flat out now to try and get their product out there because they have great products that their customers can use. And so that's really been interesting as to how they're all stepping up and really focusing on those students and on that success. From a job standpoint, it's been interesting, again, like everybody, just for us to move to an online environment. And there have been, I think, some real positives that some of the companies that we work with virtually, we might have just dealt with on the phone, and being able to see them face to face, and some of the great ideas that we've had from our members about how to share what they're doing and how can we use the technology to bring people together. So there have been a lot of positives in a very challenging situation here.
Switching gears a little bit, and I think this speaks a little bit to what Lindsay does, and especially some of the collaboration that I've talked about. But there seems to be a fair bit of that, where there's coordination between the different universities or between the different kind of venture-backed kind of groups there. I would love to kind of talk through, and Lindsay, perhaps you can kind of start with like who benefits from those types of collaborations traditionally.
Yeah, that's great. That was kind of be my response to the COVID stuff. I think this is really things that our office has been thinking about for a long time and facilitating. In particular, in regards to collaborating outside the university, I think universities collaborate well, and the fact that we have a system is great. If they didn't collaborate well, you really wouldn't have a system, and vice versa. But I think it's that connection to the outside as well. So businesses, federal government, and we are seeing partnerships in a major way. And just today, earlier today, we announced the Task Force on Research and Innovation for COVID that's bringing together our system, university researchers, innovators, and our chancellor very much so wanted to be research and innovation. He knows it goes hand in hand, and he knew that it had to have an external face. So that's the whole point of this thing. So we're definitely along that track, and we're hoping this can be a launch point for not just, hey, let's use this to help address COVID, but hey, let's use this to streamline things and make sure we can do this more often. We were talking about it before COVID. It's all the more important now.
Yeah, I think I've heard a lot of conversations around, it's business returning to normal, but maybe this is the time where we're realizing that business as normal or business as usual isn't exactly as efficient as it could be. Stephanie or Henry or David, do you have anything to kind of talk about how your groups kind of handle that collaboration fact? Not all at once.
I'll jump in. Yeah, and I think just that it's been great to be a part of the USM program, see what's coming out. But as I said before, we also have the opportunity to work with folks like Stephanie, and we have a reciprocal relationship with OpenWorks. So it's been really beneficial for I mean, I just think it's a natural state of being in the community of working collaboratively in the ecosystem as it were, where I think it's a natural. Students, for at least for us, students are looking for that looking for help and looking for mentorship, and I think that open collaborative nature has been really, really beneficial to the students. And then our whole goal is to turn, as a 80 some odd percent, 85 I think 85% of students who graduate from the University of Baltimore stay in Baltimore. So if we can create those collaborative opportunities while they're still working as students and getting their degree and getting their business up and running, then it benefits Baltimore even better, because the hope is that we've trained them well enough to go out into the community to launch their business and to be successful and raise revenues for the city and the tax base and employment, things like that. So I think in a way everybody benefits.
Great.
I agree. I think collaboration is key to everything that we do. And to Henry's point, it's so important for our students to feel like Baltimore or Maryland is a great place for them to be able to stay, to build their careers, to build a business. They've spent 4 years here cultivating a community. And so I think it's really important for them to understand all the resources, all the people, all the networks that they can tap into in order to start their lives here.
Sean, could I hop in with a quick question?
I mean, yeah, go ahead. Your show.
Thanks. Henry and David and Stephanie and Lindsay, the whole concept behind collaboration is one of the core foundations of the Startup Grind global community. And one of my missions has been, since I became involved, is to do what I can, not only personally, but as a chapter director and with the resources of the chapter, to be proactive in helping to increase those collaboration efforts across the board. And was wondering, the four of you are operating in unique but similar ecosystems, sub-ecosystems, I'll call it, of the larger Maryland ecosystem. What difficulties are each of you experiencing now in your own ecosystem that maybe is throwing up a roadblock or 2 or 3? What problems do you see that we as a region need to address to continue to increase that cross collaboration among all stakeholders in the region? Stephanie, how about you? Let's go. I'll go first.
I think working with creatives, artists, and designers is its own kind of subset of entrepreneurship, right? And it has its own set of challenges and roadblocks. One thing that I come across very often is that folks don't know or understand the value of a creative entrepreneur. Folks think of a designer only in one capacity of, oh yeah, I need to hire a graphic designer to be on my startup team to make this cool logo or a brochure or something like that. And so I think it's also making sure that artists and designers have a seat at the table to be able to show folks the power behind art and design. So everything that we touch is, has been impacted by an artist or a designer. Somebody carefully thought about how things function and, the user interface of something, all the technology that you utilize in this virtual format, that's all been touched by an artist or a designer. So I find that there's an educational component to getting folks to understand that artists and designers aren't just pigeonholed into one thing and one thing only.
Do you feel that what you need is for your ecosystem, your sub-ecosystem, to get more exposure out into the region so that people know what everything that you and your entrepreneurs have to offer?
Absolutely. I think it's always twofold, and that's something that excites me most about the work that I do on a day-to-day basis. It's not just bringing our artists and designers out into the community, but it's also drawing the community in to see and experience firsthand the work that our students are doing.
Okay.
David, I think you wanted to chime in there.
Yeah, I was just going to say, to build on Stephanie's point, it is interesting looking at some of the student entrepreneurs that we are talking with, particularly recently. And to Stephanie's point about having that creative ability, I'd really like to see where we could build more teams where you have that kind of real entrepreneurial drive, but then you can get those people who can do that user interface, be that creative, have that other person that maybe can really drive the business development. So many of our students, are kind of trying to do it alone. And I think that's a real challenge. And, because they may be coming from the business school, but they need that developer, they need that creative because, okay, well, I may be able to do one thing, but that ability to form teams. And I think that the students really struggle with, how to find those other co-founders to come in and really help their teams, or they think they can go it alone. So absolutely, I think people don't think enough about the creative aspect. And because you need to have stuff that stands out and that is usable and all those things. So I totally agree with Stephanie.
So that actually kind of brings me to the next point I want to talk about, is how you see these student entrepreneurs balancing everything, right? These are young students for the most part. I know, Henry, you had mentioned some of yours are coming back in from the workforce and trying to kind of train themselves in a new career. But how are you seeing these students kind of balancing not only a full course load, trying to work toward a degree or a certificate in some way, oftentimes part-time jobs? Some of these have young families as well. How are you finding that these entrepreneurs are balancing that workload and still trying to build a business?
Well, I'll just jump in here again.
Sure, David.
A number of our entrepreneurs, they find that challenging, and we're always in an interesting place working for an educational institution that you're always like, well, I'd really like for you to get your degree. I don't want you to quit school to do this. And sometimes, that's a challenging balancing act when you think, hey, you should really go after this. But yeah, a number of our companies, they're trying to get through their schoolwork. They're trying to develop the business. I think a lot of times that slows them down a little bit because they're having to do all of these other things. But the true entrepreneurial kids will work through that. And we just try to provide that support, give them those mentors, all the things that all of us do in this ecosystem to help them through that. And, they always have to come to their own decisions. If it's the right decision, to leave school to do something, you can always go back to school. But that is sort of the balancing act that I kind of see sometimes from my standpoint, is saying, I want you to get your degree. But it's also important, I think, from my standpoint, we're always trying to encourage students to do their startups, to be entrepreneurial. But I take a very long-term view on this, because in reality, I don't necessarily care if you start up tomorrow or you start up in the next 6 months. What I really want the kids to have, the students, is that mentality to think, well, it might be 10 years from now before I really find that great opportunity. And then I may know an industry, I may have some resources, I'll have a better network. And so I do like to think of this as a long-term game, that, it's great if you start, but I really want you to focus on getting these skills, abilities, mindset to go out and do this later on down the road when you might have more time, resources, and ability to do it.
Yeah, I can just jump in and echo that. It's really, for us, it's the mindset. That's the key. We encourage them to find the balance. And, most of the students who are at University of Baltimore, as the Dean, Murray Dial, says, you come to UB to become someone. So they already have that attitude that they're going to do something. They know why they're there. Not that that's a good thing or a bad thing, but that's typically the type of student who comes in. And so they're driven. And, yes, to David's point, sometimes they spend too much time working on the business or too much time on school. Trying to find that balance is the key. But whether they launch or not, what we want them to walk away with is the understanding of the value of the entrepreneurial mindset, being innovators and problem solvers. And again, given what's happening right now, we can see that sort of take root and maybe in a different way. And most of the students, when they launch or when they leave, aren't ready to launch, even though that's our goal, even in the Entrepreneurship Fellows program. But they leave, and some of them, we had 2 who graduated last spring who went into the startup community to work for other companies. So they have a great understanding of what it's like to run a company. And, maybe, right down the road, that spark will come back, or they'll find themselves in a position financially or otherwise where they can either go back to their idea or find a new problem to solve. But they can fit right into this entrepreneurship community that's so vibrant in the city by dint of working on something in college.
Lindsay, Stephanie, any thoughts? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, I think it is important for us to kind of take the long game approach, because I know I work with students who are so passionate that honestly, sometimes I feel like a dream crusher, where I'm the person who has to kind of reel them back into reality and kind of get them to really think holistically about this idea that they want to go pursue. I've had students who have come back to campus so inspired by a study abroad experience or a vacation that they want to relocate there permanently and start a business and buy real estate and all this. And it's like, whoa. Like, you spent 10 days there? Do you really think you know all the ins and outs about how to start a business in a foreign country? And so sometimes I honestly feel like I'm the person who just has to do that reality check for them. And I think it's also important because there's this really unhealthy narrative around always working, always grinding, this and that, failing forward, yada, yada. And this idea that if you're an entrepreneur, you are spending every second of every day working so you can make this idea what we define as a success. So I think that there's also a responsibility on our part to reframe what is success, and that there is no right or wrong for a student, and that they should have the flexibility and the autonomy to define that for themselves. And what they're envisioning as success might not align with what we envision.
You totally read my mind. That's exactly where I was trying to lead this kind of conversation, is just kind of say, I know what a traditional startup is trying to be and what is deemed successful, right? They get their Series A, or they get into a great VC firm and they pivot and all that kind of stuff. But for student entrepreneurs, is there a different level of success that people should be kind of focused on? And maybe, Lindsay, you might want to take this from an ecosystem kind of perspective.
Yeah, I completely agree with all those sentiments. And I don't know what that success is. I think that's where it comes down to individual students. It's so specific. So I don't think I can weigh in there other than to say that there is a difference, and it does get tricky because we also run programs at universities that aren't just working with students, and the lines blur. And so it's really important. I'm so glad. I feel like most of the times I have to remind people about this aspect, and all 3 of my colleagues here, kind of put it right out there. So if anyone else wants to jump in, that's that would be great. But for me, like, for one student, it may be financial independence. For another, it's just as individual as the student's learning plan, the reason why they're there, as Henry said, at the university in the first place. So.
All right, let's move to some other questions here that I've gotten from Zoom group chat. Doug Hawley, who I think got like 8,000 shout outs earlier, he asked, what interesting or unexpected ways have you found to move programming online? Anything that you weren't expecting coming up with this shift to virtual environments, or anything you're happy to kind of, Stephanie, I see you shaking your head. You got something for us?
Well, yeah, and Sean, our Upstart competition extremely well, but it's a 2-month accelerator process culminates in a big finale event and celebratory event where we award $100,000 in grant funding to up to 5 out of our 8 finalists. And so as part of that, we've always done a real-time people's choice voting. And that was one of the things that we really had to think about, well, how do we shift this? Do we just do away with it altogether? Do we divide that money out amongst the 8 finalists so everybody gets a portion? Is there a winner? Is there no winner? And so what we've done is actually utilize a platform called Wishpond to create an online voting contest so that we could move that online. So even though we couldn't live stream any pitches or have a finale event that's open to the public, we were still able to engage our audience that way. And typically, you know, we would get maybe 200 people at an in-person event who were able to vote. And by just switching it online and having our finalists self-promote, we've been able to expand our reach to over 2,200 people. So that's been a really surprising, powerful way that we've been able to kind of use COVID-19 to still bring together our community and still make our finalists feel like they're being celebrated.
Henry or David, any surprises or unexpected wins or failures from moving online?
Oh, I guess that not too much from us. I think it's been a motivation for a long time. We have thought about. We have companies that are very diverse in terms of their locations. So they're in DC or they're in New Jersey, and so we do have this virtual community. And for a long time, I think we kind of struggled as to how to really try to bring that community together. And we thought about, well, we could do some more virtual events, but whether it was out of laziness or just not being, you know, the technology question was too hard, whatever it was, you know, we could never quite get it done. And obviously with the changes and with all of the being forced into learning the technology, it really has forced us to do that. And so now we are in a much better place in terms of bringing our one member in California and saying, hey, you know, we can get you together, the other tech startups, have that forum for sharing ideas and challenges and all of that. We have basically been able to do these things.
Great. Henry,
I
anything
think
to
my
add there?
internet's.
Oh, that's all right. You were frozen it still worked. So don't worry about it. We still heard everything we needed.
Yeah, just quickly, I think I mentioned it before.
So that's been that's come out of this, the change.
All right, Henry.
I was just going to say, I sort of mentioned this alone together mentality that I think has been a nice benefit. Interestingly enough, University of Baltimore, I think the shift was less, burdensome for us than for other schools. We've been doing online education for a number of years, especially in terms of the business school. But one of the things I think that has surprised people is the difference between online learning and teaching like this. So I think it's been a good awakening for all of us to see other possibilities of what education online could look like. And I think we're learning every day about making this a better experience for everyone.
Great. Another question here from the chat here. Brian asks how you guys, the panelists here, how do you connect with your business community? How do you connect the local business community here to benefit the student graduate entrepreneurs? How have you been handling that?
Well, I'll jump in. I just feel like it feels like Jeopardy. I just hit the buzzer faster. I don't know whether that question was now, right now, or in general, and I guess I can answer it in either way.
Sure.
We have a very strong alumni group, that we can call on, have advisory boards and panels as a great jumping off place. But also, honestly, I just love to get involved. I was a volunteer mentor at University of Baltimore for a couple of years before I took on the role as director. And it was just a natural for me to continue to do the networking that I've done. So, so in today's, right now, this is a great way for us to continue to get out and meet people. I'm constantly amazed at the generosity of the people in the community that I run into, where I meet people who have skills in mentors that I'm looking for. Maybe I have somebody who has left, and just about everybody I talk to is willing to at least meet with a student for an hour or sit on a panel to judge a pitch competition. So, from my perspective, it's just asking and getting out there and getting exposure and coming down out of the ivory tower whenever I can, whenever it's possible.
Is there any way to kind of make sure that, I think to Brian's question too, it's also about how are you developing those skills in those startup and those student entrepreneurs so that after, they leave your universities or your programs, how are they still tying themselves back into that network, or how to make sure that they aren't losing those connections?
That's a tough question. And I think it just depends on the students, but we do our best to make sure that they have made some connections during their time. Certainly it's one of the key benefits of coming to the center is dipping into that large cache of mentors and volunteers. And we try to invite as many people from the business community as we can. And then, I literally push and cajole the students to meet the people who come to the events and to develop business relationships. We do workshops on how to network, and we try to follow up with them after they leave. But it really just depends on the individual and what their needs are.
Yeah, and I'll jump in here to just say that our investment fund, one of the criteria that qualifies companies is actually that they're an alum. And we've stretched that pretty wide as well. It's not just, you graduated last year. And one reason we're doing that is we recognize the power of our alum community. I mean, we're universities. That's the best thing we have is our students, and they are still our students afterwards. So in addition to obviously joining the incubators and all these resources that we offer to anybody that's not even an alum, some programs that we see across the state do have kind of carve outs for alum as well. We see the importance there. But I had to give a plug to that investment fund, especially considering a lot of people don't know about it that are alum and don't think about that. So happy to be a point of contact for anyone curious about this.
And just to follow up on that, if I may, needless to say, I'm very pleased that one of our incubator member companies was successful in getting momentum funding and was a Towson alum. So I'm really, and I'll give a plug to Lindsay here, because since she's come in, she's been great about really bringing all of the university system resources together. And I think that's been a hugely positive aspect. So thank you, Lindsay.
Great. Here's a wonderful question that actually kind of dips back to what I was going to ask, but I'll take credit for it now. So this is great. What do you see are current gaps? What are you guys in need of that either your universities aren't providing you? The university system, you can talk about that a little bit. What isn't being provided for you guys that you feel is necessary to better impact these student entrepreneurs? If there are any. There's another twist too.
Again, quick on the draw, I guess. This actually my answer might tie back to your question from earlier too about roadblocks, funding. I mean, to be quite honest, and recognition by the community, the business community, the value of university-based entrepreneurship centers, what we can provide up and down, the scale from launching new businesses to providing you with employees. So a greater awareness and openness to support our programs and to help fund them would be terrific.
Yeah, I'll just say, I've been, you always would like more funding. You would always like to have more funding for businesses. But I have to say, I've been overly pleased with Towson in particular in their willingness, particularly on President Schatzel's part, to make the resources available by bringing in the new executive director position, for doing the lease for the Armory building in downtown. So we still have to make all that work. But I have to say the recognition that the incubator's got and the focus that Towson and I think the university system as a whole has provided has been really great. And yeah, you can always use more, but I've been very, very, very pleased with what I see out of USM and Towson.
I'm going to take a slightly different approach, and I would say what's really missing is a holistic view on wellness and self-care. I mean, we're asking our students, at least for artists, to be in studio classes for 6 hours at a time, which is extremely exhausting. And then I don't think the answer is always in programs and offerings like that, because you have to be well enough to take the initiative to attend said program. So it's kind of like a chicken or the egg type of scenario. So I would really also challenge our education system to think a little bit more holistically about how can we make sure that our students are taking the time that they need in order to care for themselves.
Yeah, Scott, I'll definitely have to agree there. And it's this kind of integration. I think we had a shift where universities didn't do entrepreneurship, and now great, universities do entrepreneurship, but in a lot of ways it isn't extracurricular, it's co-curricular. It's here's all this stuff you're doing and then more. And so we've seen some of our universities find ways to bake in, you know, hey, you're working on this startup. Can we count that for some credits, for goodness sake, because you're learning much more than you would have learned in X class. And that true integration in the curriculum, and we're seeing some creativity emerge with that, but we're not there yet with it being completely baked in all around our university system. And that's tough because sometimes they have different mindsets. People teaching students have one mindset of the pedagogy and the learning of all that, and others that are focused more on the startup aspect can expect different things. So still have a ways to go, but I completely agree, Steph.
Could I ask a follow-on question, Stephanie and Lindsay? Do you find when it comes to the wellness self-care concept, is it that the student entrepreneurs are not self-aware enough to be able to help themselves? Is it a lack of education/training? They just simply don't have the right information to be able to help themselves, or is it more organizational or institutional type support that they can turn to? I'm very curious to hear where you guys feel there are holes in that environment.
So I think some of it is the expectation and the demand on our students, and this idea that you always need to be busy, you always need to be creating, you have to be doing something. If you're not working on your startup, then what are you actually doing? Like those types of mentalities, I think, puts a lot of pressure on our students. And then I think there is a component that they don't realize that the actions right now are going to impact them long term. So they don't realize that the poor eating or sleeping habits that they have right now are going to end up impacting their livelihoods later on. I think for a lot of them, they're young and they're healthy and, somewhat happy. And so I think a lot of the time they don't realize that their bodies are, one of the tools that they have in order to be able to continue making work. And if they're not taking care of themselves now, that's going to impact them in their longevity.
Yeah, and some of it, again, is just the not knowing. Sometimes university, it's still a little new. I know entrepreneurship isn't new, but especially when you start talking about the graduate students and stuff like that, but it's not something that's been navigated a lot before. And so if we aren't designing things into these tracks, these educational tracks, which need to be approved, and there's a lot of processes, So those are some of the things that we're trying to break through, some structural barriers, I think, in addition to what Stephanie said about the cultural, basically, awareness around it.
Henry, David?
Can't find my unmute button. Yeah, not to belabor it. I think, again, some of it is, again, I'm looking at things from a slightly different vantage point, but I think recognition is growing. And I think maybe one benefit of having to be thrust into this position we're in is greater understanding from the community and as well as the institutions that, mental health is nothing to be messed around with. One of the other positives that has come out of this for us is, again, this cohort of students. The camaraderie that I feel is growing, and it crosses the 2 years. Each of our cohorts are 2 years in time frame, and so, but they're together. So we have first years and second years basically, and they're working together more. And I think really reaching out and helping each other cope, but also using some of their own skills, as I mentioned before. One of our students is building a gaming company specifically designed to help with mental health issues, behavioral health issues. And while she's working on her business, she's reached back out to all of us to invite us to play video games. She'd be happy to recommend video games. And she's organized a group Dungeons and Dragon game. So I haven't played Dungeons and Dragons since I look like the kids in Stranger Things. And so I've created a character. I'm a dwarf. I've actually got my little, I don't know if you can see it, my little cast iron figurine from when I was a teenager. And it's just an opportunity to take a moment to, in this case, create another persona for yourself, live a different life. But how does technology, how does what we're learning, how is that going to help our mental health? Just recognizing that that's a really good, new first step, I think. So I don't know whether that answered your question.
Yeah, and I'll just, it's been interesting, not so much from I guess what we are doing, and we always try to encourage our member companies in a very ad hoc way to make sure that they're taking care of themselves and that they're doing things besides working 24/7 on their startups, which is hard for them to do. But I was going to say, I've seen a lot of new apps and technologies coming out focused on student wellness. So just over the last really 6 months, it has been interesting to see the number of, they're not necessarily local, but people who are really focused on student mental health, particularly in the post-secondary environment. And so we've talked with one company recently about the incubator that is totally, how do we support students in their mental health? So it is an interesting area that I think, Stephanie and everybody's right, that there needs to be more effort focused on.
Awesome. The last thing I wanted to do here is, and I'm not going to say any names in case they don't want to be put on the spot, but I know we have some student entrepreneurs on the call. I would love it if they would want to kind of share their firsthand experience. Obviously, you can talk a little bit about your business, and you got a room full of captive, interested parties here ready to help you. So this is your moment. Anyone?
It's your moment to shine and show up.
Okay, that didn't work. That's all right. There's someone.
Yes, I don't know if you can hear me or not.
We can hear you, Nicole. Go ahead. Tell us who you are, what business you are, what group you're representing today, and I would love to hear how they've supported you in your business's growth.
Okay. So my name is Nicole Mighty. I'm the CEO and head designer for Spiked Orchids. It's an upcycling company. I take your old garments and treasures and turn them into something more useful and new again. My focus is been a solution to the fashion waste issue. I am part of the great family of Henry Mortimer.
Oh, great.
I am one of the finalists that's in the RISE competition, and I'm the one he was referring to as far as making masks for the hospitals and some of the community. What I've done with that is I'm selling to the consumers that needs it right away now. And for every purchase that they make, I donate 2 masks to the hospitals, mostly to University of Maryland, because my daughter is an assistant to the nurses down in the critical care unit. So it became a dire necessity for me to make sure that she had masks. It's been a challenge dealing with classes though, because all my 6 classes are now online. So it's very challenging to balance that out with my schoolwork, which school usually wins, because I really love this. Henry has done an awesome job. This is my 2nd semester at UBolt, and I classify myself as a professional student. But being a part of UBolt with Henry has developed something that is very unusual for me. I have a lot of school spirit because of this eFellows program. So I am very proud to be a part of Henry's family, is how I'm going to put it. Stephanie, you hit everything on the nose as far as mental health. And I'm just going to be transparent. The highlights to this whole Corona situation, Henry had spoke about, which was the camaraderie of us coming all together. I look forward to Wednesday classes because it's a relief from the online classes. For whatever reason, these professors feels as though they must increase the workload, which also increase the mental issues. That's a huge problem for me. And this is the reason why I'm literally grinding to get my classworks done, because of that. If I don't keep up with it, I'm going to lose my scholarship with the eFellows program. That's not an option. Did I answer all the questions?
You did. No, thank you very much, Nicole, for speaking.
Yes, thank you,
about your
Nicole.
experience. Is there any way that our network can help you?
I'm sure Henry can suggest a bunch of things. I was listening. I don't know everything. Everything's not in place. If I can get the funding, that's the reason for the RISE competition that I entered in. If I can get the funding to get some employees, because I'm doing all this by myself. So I need to grow the business in order to get it to where it needs to go. The clientele and the money is there. I just need staff to train and relieve me of everything that I'm doing. Like I've been trying to find somebody through this whole thing to find someone to do a website for me. And that's costly. I can't see my clientele anymore because I depend mostly on my clientele to create the income coming in. Fortunately, the grants that they have out there, I've hired my accountant to help me apply for those, and she can only get me qualified for one that she applied for. So that's a major issue. So it's always been me financially to get the funding. What I do doesn't require a whole lot of capital because the client and the customers are the ones supplying the material. Some things I might have to fund, but the way I do it is the clients pay for the supplies upfront anyway. But I need manpower. I need help just to do the basic stuff, websites, cutting, and I do all the designing, but I'm literally doing everything right now.
Well, I really appreciate it, and thank you very much, Nicole. I noticed a lot of you are reaching and talking into the group chat portal. Please feel free to put your contact information there and ways you can help or what you're looking for. I think that's a great way to tap into our network. I think I'll take this opportunity to thank everyone on my panel. Henry, Stephanie, Lindsay, and David, thank you guys so much for giving some time here to talk through what you guys are doing to support the next generation of entrepreneurs. So thank you so much. And Chris, it's balls back in your court there.
Yes, Henry, Lindsay, Stephanie, and David, thank you so very much for being, part of this event. For everybody, we do videotape all of our events, and as soon as I'm through doing my editing work, I will be more than happy to share the link with you, and it will also be up on our website. I also want to put out there for the four of you, and I know that Henry and David, you and I have talked a couple of times about this, and that is, as a chapter director of a global organization, I stand ready to bring whatever global resources we need to the table to help us locally. And Lindsay and Stephanie, that means whatever I can do to help you guys in any way that I can as a chapter director or as a representative of the global community, I'm just an email or a phone call away. So just so you know, if I didn't make it official in the past, I'm making it official now, and I welcome your outreach. Okay. So thank you all again. What I would like to do is just open the floor. Is there anyone out there who has anything that they would like to contribute or collaborate on during the last few minutes of our event? Okay. All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. We've been able to get it. We're ending right about 5:15, so that means we haven't ruined anybody's dinner, or at least I don't think so yet. Nor have we taken away from all of the familial responsibilities that each one of us has over the balance of the evening. So everyone, thank you so very much for attending, and we'll be back next week. You can check out our chapter website. You'll be getting our newsletter. And we hope that all of you will come back and continue to be involved in the community to help support one another. So thank you again, and everybody have a good evening.
Thank you. Thanks for your support,
Thank
Chris
you.
and Sean.
And thank you, Sean.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Sean.
Thanks,
Great
guys.
job, man.
Killing it as moderator.
I did all right. All right. See you guys next month. Take care.
You should maybe start a podcast or something.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Thanks, everybody.